Good evening, everybody. I think apparently that clock's a bit slow, but we do make it 1:30. I'm Councillor Sarah Barwick, the Chair of the Planning, Healthier, Stronger Community Policy Advisory Committee, and I am pleased to welcome you to this meeting. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? I will ask so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. No one, thank you. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Service Team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Are there any apologies? No. Are there any substitutes? No, and we'd like to welcome Councillor Spooner back. Nice to have you back. There are no urgent items, but there has been an update to request to withdraw item 11. And Councillor Hayward, I believe, is going to come in and give us some information on that.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, it's simply that the report was written prior to the announcement around devolution and local government review, and we await advice on some of the spatial planning issues which are addressed, because it will be no good spending a quite considerable sum on a consultant's report which is not worth the paper it's written on ultimately. So we will come back with something, but once we know the way forward. Thank you. And it's worth saying that in light of Overeem Scrutiny's review as well, I think there was also a kind of question mark over the timing anyway, because there was no specific timetable set by government for looking at the charging levels. So it could have waited anyway. So I was already very ambivalent about whether we should progress it at this point anyway. But now the decision was made for us. Thank you.
Thank you. So I propose that as a seconder. Thank you. Do we all agree? Thank you. Are there any visiting members? I can't see any. Are there any disclosures by members or officers? No. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? Thank you. Item 7. I move that all items be taken in public. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 8. Is there any comments on accuracy of the minutes of December the 5th, 2024? No. Thank you. I move that the minutes of the meeting on the 5th of December 2024 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 9, are there any comments on the forward plan, or do the Cabinet members wish to make any comments? And that's on page 6 to 11. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. The plan as it is okay, but it's more what's not there. And I'm just thinking perhaps the Cabinet might like to think, given that we know with devolution a mayor will be elected, or is likely to be elected, for Kent and Medway in May 2026. As a council, as Maidstone Council, we really only have a fairly short time ahead of us when we can actually make policies and implement them. Because once the mayor's been elected, our abilities will probably be circumscribed by the government. I'm sure it would be a conflict if we still had full sovereignty in our areas, and you've got a mayor who's responsible for the most of the high level stuff we would do. So I'm just wondering if it would be sensible, perhaps when we do our next meeting in February, if the Cabinet look forward through to the period up to April 2026 in terms of a forward plan as to actually what we can actually do during the remaining period when we're probably going to remain sovereign over our own affairs. And I'd also ask, as part of that, that we again look into speeding up the leisure centre, which I'll refer to later on. But also, one specific I noticed is in the minutes of our last meeting. So on page, let me just find it. Oh yeah, page 5, so minute number 88. Everyone will remember the long discussion we had on the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. I don't see any reference to that coming back for further discussion, because I know we were going to ask the Cabinet to write to I think it was KCC, to ask for an extension of time to actually prepare a cycling and walking strategy which would meet the needs of Maidstone Borough going forward. So I'd assumed that we would be seeing a report in the forward plan coming back on that. So I'd just like to understand where that's sort of gone, as it were. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harper. As we discussed earlier today, certainly the devolution and local government reorganisation has thrown some spanners that we don't yet know the size and shape of. I think as you know, we are going to look closely at the unfolding scenario. We don't know what the timescales are yet. We don't know exactly what powers we've got up until what point. So we're carrying on in with Plan A, with very much a mindfulness that we are going to need to potentially reprioritise stuff and so forth. But at the moment, we don't know what we need to do on that scale. So we're carrying on as we are until we know better. The one thing you did mention around the Mayor taking some of our aspects away, I don't think there'll be that much from what I've read so far. It looks like there's a few bits from KCC that will disappear upwards and a few bits from national government that will come downwards. But broadly speaking, most of our functions and policy areas will not disappear. We may lose a few. But yes, we are very sighted on those changes.
If I could just ask about the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. I don't know if Councillor Harwood knows an update.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the hands of Kent County Council and as a transportation authority. Once we have a view from them on our preferred approach, which is actually fits much better with the amount of road, for want of a better expression, we've got left in front of us, we will report back, but I have no timetable on that, as is usual when we're dealing with another authority. Thank you.
Thank you. So those comments have been noted. I move that the forward plan be noted. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 10. Councillor Thompson, I believe this is yours.
Thank you, Chair. It is my privilege to speak first to it. I certainly don't own it, but I'm very happy to go first. It has been a great privilege to be the portfolio holder, to represent Maidstone Museum and the many cross-cutting aspects of the Council's long-standing work. I've expressed gratitude to my predecessors beforehand, and I'm happy to repeat that. Anybody that's not been to see the Lives in Our Landscape gallery or indeed revisited it are missing out on a treat. It is an exemplary gallery and indeed not out of place with the standard of very much else that is going on in Maidstone Museum. In the portfolio which this pack covers, you will note that we've drawn together very purposefully overlaps between culture, arts, the museum, with economic development, with leisure and tourism, with education, and with health. And these touch points have been key parts of my conversations with the many experienced, enthusiastic and generous people that I have met in my months in post. It has been a real treat, quite frankly. So the papers that you have before you today relate to just the aspect of the refreshment of the local history gallery, but not the museum as a whole. But it does relate to the dialogue with the Archaeological Society and with the Maidstone Museums Foundation and the William and Edith Oldham Trust members. I've met many of these people, and as you can see in these papers, several of those are actively involved in this. I certainly would want to say that there is a great deal more energy and enthusiasm in the support for Maidstone than the sums of money mentioned in paragraph 2.4, while we are obviously moved to see the sums of money and we're very grateful for them. It is the commitment of the wider community to the museum that I'm really very proud of. And it's a privilege to introduce our museum manager, Natalie Moore, who I understand this is her first visit to the Town Hall today for a formal meeting, and I will allow her to make remarks about the rest of the paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Hello everyone, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Natalie Moore, I'm the museum's manager. I'm here to talk to you about the paper. I know there's not very much in here, but obviously I'm willing to answer any questions, give you any more details. So leading on from the success of Lives in Our Landscape, we have another £100,000 from the William and Edith Oldham Charitable Trust, and that's to be used for the refurbishment, redesign of our local history gallery. The local history gallery at the moment sits right next to Lives in Our Landscape, which accentuates its slightly dated appearance. The actual contents of the gallery are brilliant. The objects in the gallery, the aspects of life in Maidstone, the industry, agriculture, health, they're all very well shown in the gallery, but they're shown in a thematic way right now, and what we want to do is show them chronologically, so that as you leave Lives in Our Landscape, you move into the local history gallery in the 16th century and move through until the 21st century, which makes much more sense than the themes at the moment, which you're sort of walking around not quite knowing what you're going to see next. So what we're going to be doing is using the existing objects, reinterpreting those objects, redisplaying those objects, stripping out some of the things that are in there at the moment. If you know that, I know some of you know that gallery quite well, there's cases in there with, you know, things sort of balanced on top of them, things that feel like they don't really fit, items that perhaps were kept in there because there was nowhere else for things to go. And our aspiration is that that's not how we manage the museum anymore, that actually we find proper homes for things and we display things in a way that's great for residents and visitors to see and very understandable. So aside from the redisplay and the reinterpretation, redecoration of the space, the stripping out, so it'll look entirely different, we're also encouraging people, we're working with the Kent Family History Society, we're encouraging people to look at their genealogy and their heritage of Maidstone really. We're going to run a competition to encourage engagement with the gallery. We've done some focus groups, we've done a bit of outreach, we've had surveys for people to fill in to talk about favourite items, but we don't want to finish the engagement there. We want people to genuinely feel like it's their gallery, and so we're going to run workshops at the museum with the Kent Family History Society, so people can come in and either start their journey of thinking, oh, you know, I wonder where my surname comes from, etc., or continue a journey. And if we can find a family who have been in Maidstone since 17th century, 16th century, brilliant, that'd be really exciting, and we'll feature them in the gallery. And aside from that, in our 21st century section, we're going to be reaching out to the wider community. We're going to have a specific new case that we'll ask community groups to come and utilise. So local scout groups, local faith groups, people who would like to come and put on a small scale exhibition in the gallery, something that reflects the history of Maidstone. So we're sort of hoping to cover all bases. Happy to answer any question that I can, give more detail. I don't want to talk for too long if everything's covered.
Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. That was very loud. Brilliant. I mean, I know it's a short report, but it's a great new thing for Maidstone, and I think it went, working in the Lives in Our Landscape Gallery, and Paul Oldham was on the board, obviously, for that, and he was really keen to put the donation towards the next the local history gallery. And I think if you do go down that flex step and you turn left, you go into the amazing new gallery, and you turn right and you think, where am I? What's this all about? You see a chair with a little bit of a string across, which kind of means, it doesn't have a sign, but it means don't sit on that, I presume. So it'd be nice to kind of get that when you went down the flex step, that all of it had a theme. And I think as much as we all love the museum, one thing that is lacking is a bit of a theme travelling through the museum and all the different galleries, so that you know where you are. And I mean, there's something about it being an eclectic mix, I get that, but also I think this gallery does look a bit dated, so it'd be so nice to bring that. And I think it's really nice how you're thinking about the oldest family. That's a nice touch. And I think, getting the youth group involved, great, and the new display case. So, I mean, I know this report isn't for decision, it's for noting, but fantastic, crack on.
That's Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the work going on is marvellous, and as Natalie knows, I've been involved both as chair of the old ERO and HCL committees when we first started the whole refurbishment concept, the National Lottery application, and then with friends of the museum through to seeing where we are now with the first deliverables coming out. One thing I was shocked at, just looking at paragraph 2.2, was when you said that the current local history gallery was created in 2001. I always thought it was something like the 1970s or 1980s. Well, that's what it looks like anyway. Because I always used to think the actual exhibit was the way the gallery was laid out. It was like a time warp. So to bring it up to date with the ideas we've got here will just be fabulous. And it will show, plus with Lives in Our Landscape, how we hopefully can start to pick up over time other items from the original plans to refurbish the whole museum and show to funders what we actually can deliver in the museum. So I think it's really excellent the work you've done there. And in particular now that we're working with larger groups of residents, with some of the primary schools and, as you said, the LGBT local community, because I think that's always been something which has historically been lacking, and I'm really pleased that we're taking the work we started a year or two ago with that group forward. And Maidstone's oldest family, I think you've probably got one of them sitting about 4 along from you, because I know Tony Harwood and his family have lived in the borough a very long time, so I'm sure he'll be one of the people submitting for your competition. But yeah, no, it'd be really interesting to see the outcome of that. So an excellent report. And I think it just shows that the faith most of us have had in the museum for a long period of time is well placed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. My family has been in Maidstone for many years also, and I went to the museum as a youngster, and I've taken my children there, and most recently I had a friend over from America who loved it. So I'm really pleased that we've got an amazing facility in the town, and even if somebody goes there not necessarily sort of focused on the museum, even if just, I think it's striking how good the museum is. I actually thought about Maidstone Museum this Christmas in London, and it was actually there was a museum which is Handel's house and Jimi Hendrix's house alongside, which has gradually been evolving over the years. I've sort of kept a little bit of an eye on that. And one mention was the fact that Handel's clavichord is in Maidstone Museum. Now, I wonder whether, you know, it's amazing as a facility as it is, but there are some opportunities there possibly with specific items. I'm sure that museum would absolutely love to have a small time when they might be able to display it, and I'm sure they've got things like Jimi Hendrix guitars that they might want to lend to us, and that could create, you know, a bit of a buzz. And that's one item that we've got. We've got so many good items there. I'm just wondering if that sort of outreach could sort of generate that extra sort of level of interest. That's topical.
Could you use the mic, please?
Sorry, apologies. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the collection's so vast, and one of the aspirations for us, I guess, is the auditing of the collection. So, you know, it sounds very process driven, but I guess museums are around process and safeguarding, you know, keeping things safe. So I think it's, for us, it would be about moving forward, looking at what we've got and the provenance of those items, and then partnering, as you say, with, if there's places in London that we can partner with and say, so as an example, and if my colleague was here, I'd be double checking with her, but the British Museum has the original, obviously, of the iguanodon that was found in Maidstone. We have a copy, and the British Museum has the original. We have other items that we share with the British Museum. So I think that's a great idea. I hadn't thought about that. I'll take that back to the team. Yeah, great plan.
Thank you very much. Councillor Keeley.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for my late entrance, everybody. Really just want to echo what my colleagues have said. As somebody who was born and bred here, I've got really fond memories of going there and seeing it evolve into something is really, really cool. The thing that sticks in my head was the mummy, which as a child absolutely fascinated me. I think anybody would. There's some information later on about people, how they feel about belonging to Maidstone, and I think this is something that would increase. There were gaps I noticed in the figures about where people felt they didn't belong, and I think this is something really, really powerful. And I can give you 17th century, but that might not equate with Tony's and Brian's. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the members for those really caring and interested remarks. Natalie and I discussed the sorts of things that we anticipated might come up this evening, so a couple of extra remarks to make. We have reflected on the fact that there is not a single history of Maidstone. We may fall into using the simple phrase from time to time, but clearly there are now many, many facets to the developing history of Maidstone, and an important feature that's come out of the recent funding developments is an open gallery space, display space, which will be kept in a flexible open condition at the museum's behest. We're not giving the impression that anybody can come along and decide what they want to do with it, but it's at the curatorial disposal of the museum to be able to tell many different stories. Certainly the last time that I made another visit around to note what sorts of things I needed to be more aware of in my current role, realising that much of upstairs is packed with the round-the-world collections of a particular gentleman, and the way that the story is told shows how his view and appreciation of the world changed radically as he did so, and there is as many stories as there are both artefacts and people looking at them. That therefore means that we definitely do want to be looking in the political pressure that we are anticipating now to ensuring that we're supporting Natalie and staff at the museum. There is no reason why the energies going on there need to be hindered in any way, shape or form. We were speaking yesterday about how we're going to maintain pace at the highest possible level, comfortably of course, to do that, and that will involve the involvement of interested members here and other members of the community. So if you have thoughts about that, please do let her and me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. Thank you, Natalie. That is just for noting. So. All right, Councillor Harper.
It was just to, in addition to the note in the report, to make a vote of thanks to the staff, funders and Maidstone Museum Foundation for the work to deliver the new gallery, and also to the Oldham Trust for the proposed local history gallery. I think we should formally register a vote of thanks for the work done for the new gallery and the Oldham gallery as well.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Item 11, as you know, has been withdrawn, so moving on to item 12, corporate strategy 2025 to 2035. Pages 29 to 102, and I believe that is Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you. Just before I start, obviously Councillor Clark mentioned the Iguanodon. Iggy is actually Tony's oldest known relative, I believe. So he's going to win that competition. He's now going to kick me. So corporate strategy, 2025 to 2035. Okay, not going to say too much about the second date on there. And apologies for those who heard this all yesterday. You're going to hear it all again, I'm afraid. Sorry. Clearly, the world is changing quite rapidly around us. We have a new administration. We have an existing and hopefully outgoing what's it called? Strategic plan. We're calling the new one a corporate strategy. Frankly, I kind of slightly prefer the words. Apologies for the nuance there. And we need a new strategy because we need to frame the work that the new administration wants to do. Because the strategy underpins both the policy and the budget. So you will see the strategy come forward to full council alongside the budget, and the budget underpins the strategy, and then the policy work that is underway will sit neatly under this strategy. The strategy itself we worked up with the Local Government Association initially through a series of workshops. We reached out to members and to gain all member input. We obviously had a workshop in here. We've also been through public consultation. Hopefully those consultation notes are in the pack. The process will be for it to come here to all three packs. It came yesterday and it's got one next week, then to Cabinet and then to full council. And it will be signed off by full council. So the strategy itself starts with the mission of putting people and environment first. You will note that we don't mention economy in there. Specifically, we don't mention economic growth. What we want to achieve is putting those people, putting people and the environment absolutely up front. The goal is not economic growth. Economic growth may or may not happen. The economy is an enabler. What is important are the people living here and the world in which they live in. Out of that mission comes four priorities. The first one around a high quality of place adapted for a changing climate. You can read changing climate in a number of ways, but a lot of the way we've read that relates to what we normally think about as the climate, and we've got a number of outcomes we want to achieve through that. But particularly important is the word adapted, because we know that climate change, for example, is really going to hit hard. It's already hitting hard. I think there were 40 million people displaced last year through climate events. It is getting worse. We had a 40-degree temperature here, was it 18 months ago. Places like Jubilee Square do need the adaptation in the climate sense of the word to make the place livable. So there is work to do to ensure that we have a livable town in the future. Secondly, we sort of building on that theme, we're looking at resilient communities, and that brings in everything from health through to community safety, and all the good stuff we do around those, making sure that our communities are strong, resilient, and have a good voice is essential. Quality homes is third. Again, we've got a number of outcomes we want to achieve. We obviously the planning authority, so housing is very much high on our to-do list. Reducing homelessness, improving quality of accommodation, and making sure we've got affordable and social housing available to people. And then finally is the economic piece, and I've bored many of you around donut economics over the last 9 months, but the fairer economy for people and planet kind of encapsulates what I meant by donut economics, and it's about making sure that we meet social need without, whilst also meeting the environmental needs. So not overstretching resources, not over polluting. So we kind of meet both needs. And then we've got a whole a short list there about how we're going to do things, how we're going to engage with people, and so forth. We are building, or have started building, a set of KPIs, key performance indicators, that reflects those outcome measures. We also have the year one plan, which is the year one for the corporate strategy in terms of the plan, and there's a whole host of detail on there. There are figures associated with each of those actions. They are built into the draft budget that we'll come to in a minute, but you can see a lot of nice, useful, hopefully great schemes that we're putting forward. And of course, as we've said, we may only have 1 or 2 years to act in, given all the changes, so we are going to have to motor as hard and as fast as we can, and prioritise where necessary. Happy to take questions. Oh, Angela, have I covered everything?
Yeah, the only thing I would highlight is obviously the consultation document. As you said, there's a full report included and a really good summary from section 2.4, and I'll just highlight the table at 2.14, which just sets out those areas that are most relevant in terms of the terms of reference for this policy advisory committee. And that isn't to say you can't look at all of it, it's just those are the bits that are relevant to you guys. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. This is an interesting report, an interesting strategy. I only wish, as I've been saying over the last year, that it had been brought to the council earlier than it has been, because as you just said, Stuart, that we've been overtaken by the new government's decision to abolish local authorities and go for these big unitaries and having a mayor. So our ability to actually implement a lot of the ideas here is going to be heavily circumscribed. And that becomes a bit particular when you look into the year one action plan, is I suspect in reality we're only going to be able to do half a dozen or less of those items, because we've only a year or a year and a half up until the mayoral elections in May 2026, at which point strategic wider things may well be removed from our remit for the remainder time the council may remain in its format. That a lot of the ambitions here are just not going to be deliverable by Maidstone Council, and I would seriously think we need to be focusing on items here which can be delivered in 12 to 18 months, rather than some of the items, and you know, whatever people may think of them, where we're looking at initiating studies or starting to do research, because by the time you initiate a study or do research, Maidstone Council will have been abolished, and so the reports probably won't go anywhere, because it's unlikely a West Kent authority is going to be that interested in taking dead reports from an authority what's dead, given the need of a new authority just to establish itself. So I think there needs to be, and I appreciate the decisions by the government announced in December were obviously after the strategy had been worked up, But what I think we do need to do, potentially between now and overview and scrutiny in a couple of weeks' time, is perhaps, especially as I say, on the corporate strategy year one plan starting on page 48, is to go through and think which of these can actually be delivered in an 18-month time frame, because those are the ones we should focus on as a council, rather than ones which can't be delivered until Maidstone Council doesn't exist, because we'll have invested time and effort and delivered nothing for people. So I think that's quite important if we are to adopt this. And as I say, I think there's a number of things here which I think one item in particular would be not that surprise, I think is missing, is enough reference to sport and competitive sport and the benefit of sport for health and the need for a leisure centre. Now, given the council may only have 18 months to 2 years of life left in it, I think it might be one of the few things we could do, rather than the wording we have here, which, let me just find it. Yeah, on page 50, which is initiate a study into leisure options, because that would mean nothing will happen. Because if you only start looking at, base one now, by the time you do reporting, the council's probably going to be not have the legal ability to implement. However, work did start on looking at all the options around the leisure centre back in 2018, when I was chair of the Old Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee, that was then continued on by the Conservative administration and then obviously by Claudine. So we know that there's a massive amount of work has been prepared over the last 6 years, including, I would have thought, about a dozen reports to either this committee or the previous committees, saying what a leisure centre might look like. And I think if we just, rather than embarking on a new study, which, as I say, by the time that comes out, Maidstone Council won't be here, perhaps the first thing is to go back very quickly onto all the existing work, and you could, within the timescale left for this council, get a leisure centre started and get bricks and mortar started. It probably wouldn't be completed by the time we're abolished in 2028. However, our successor, West Kent or whatever, is hardly going to pull down or stop finishing off a leisure centre if it's between half and a third built. Whereas if we don't start now, quickly, you will have Tunbridge Wells will say, well, we've got facilities in Tunbridge Wells and Cranbrook. Tunbridge and Malling councils will say, we've got facilities in Tunbridge and Larkfield. Sevenoaks councils will say, we've got facilities. And they will likely conclude, we don't need another leisure centre in West Kent. We've already got quite a lot of provision. And so what will happen is there won't be a replacement for Moat Park. It will run its remainder of its time it can operate, and that will be it. Because there won't be a council representing Maidstone anymore. So unless something is done very, very quickly, I think we will lose the ability to push forward a new leisure centre for this borough. So anyway, those are some of my comments, and obviously I'm on overview and scrutiny when we can discuss some of a few more of the specifics in the action plan, perhaps in more detail then. Thank you. Oh, I would say just one last one. On page 51, explore options for cafe, and sorry Natalie, for a cafe and toilet facilities in or around Maidstone Museum. Well, I would just say that we used to have a cafe in Maidstone Museum, and one of the decisions I had to with the Old Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee was to actually close down the cafe, because the operator running it basically returned their contract, and nobody else was willing to take on a facility in the museum because of the proliferation of cafes. Literally, in Fremlin's Walk and all around the town centre, it would be incredibly difficult to get a economic case for a cafe at the museum. I'd love to see one there, but we just know that the facts don't support it. And also on our budget report on page 109, it's showing that the receipts from the shop at the museum are down, and there's obviously because of the thought of the impact of the cost of living. So to actually invest time and effort looking at a cafe, I think is a waste of time. And the museum's already got perfectly adequate toilet facilities. I mean, they could be improved, but we've got toilet facilities there at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry, no, sorry, Councillor Jeffrey wanted to come back on that first, Chair, if that's all right.
I wasn't going to say much. I was just going to say your glass seems to be a little half full this evening, Councillor Harper. Mine's quite buoyant. I do take all your points around the need to review, as I said right at the start, given there are some unknowns coming our way. But I note your points. I'm not sure I agree with them, but we will work through that over the coming months.
Thank you. Right, so I'll probably just start by saying some of this is smacks of last minute homework. Leaders forward to be confirmed. We're missing a map, and we are having a spelling mistakes as well. We're having a high quality place adapted for a changing climate. So on page 48 there, we're missing a G. But moving on from that, I think obviously new administration, new priorities, going to refresh the corporate strategy, all of that I'm on board with. That's how this works. Being part of the previous administration, unsurprisingly, I'm not going to agree with absolutely everything you've written. I take that that's granted as well. The outcomes for me, though, are a little wishy-washy in some places, and I am disappointed that we've pulled back off the number of 1,000 affordable houses. I do think that was a marker to have in there in stone, and particularly if we are moving forward towards a new unitary or whatever we are, I think it's a good aim, and it also you can check off how close you're getting to it. So I think that is disappointing. I completely agree with my colleague Councillor Harper about the leisure centre. I don't think we need imaginative ways to reimagine leisure. I think we just need to start work on the leisure centre and deliver it. 80% of the residents in our borough live within the radius of the current leisure centre. We need to put the new one there, get on with it. It won't last forever. It is Trigger's new broom, keeps on getting, new broom handles, new broom heads. We need to do something with it. I don't like where we're going through and we just say use current resources. I need to know what they are. I think if we're saying, enhanced interpretation of historic buildings and places, use current resources. I didn't know that we had current resources for specifically that thing. So I do need to know, especially as we are moving into a new setup, unitary, or how much this all is, because I do think, coming back to Councillor Harper's point, some of this needs rationalisation as we move forward, because I totally agree this was done at the point in time where we didn't know anything about devolution. Now we do, it's moving on. So between the packs and before it comes to overview and scrutiny, and certainly before it came back to full council, I think we need some movement on some of these things and looking forward. I mean, a food strategy now, would this be an appropriate time to start a food strategy? I probably would say no. Likewise, and I know I'm going to say this because I'm the previous administration, but we have put up car parking charges in the town centre. I don't think that was the right thing to do, and we obviously voted that way through fees and charges. But now we could look at some of these things that we don't necessarily need now, and we could look to not raise the car parking charges in the town centre. And I think that would be a better use of our money going forwards as we went for our residents before our residents transform into, a bigger pool. I probably will leave that there, but I just think some of this needs to evolve as our knowledge has evolved, and I am just a bit disappointed that some of the outcomes still read a little bit, forgive the phrase, like a word salad. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spooner.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I won't reiterate what my colleague has just said. I must admit I was very disappointed reading this document. It is very wishy-washy, it's very imprecise. It reads as though someone just made a list of all the things I wanted to do, and without really thinking it through how they can achieve it. I'm upset about the loss of the 1,000 affordable housing. But I'll particularly draw attention on page 48, where we say nature recovery through community partnership and action. I think we need to have a caveat in there saying that where the council has powers and resources to undertake those particular actions. I'm not certain that we have in many of those cases. I'll also just flag up Banky Meadow, which is mentioned on page 48 in Nature Recovery through Community Partnership and Action. For those that don't know, Banky Meadow is that valuable, wonderful green wedge of land that separates Grove Green from Bearsted. It has been allocated as a green wedge in local plans for years and years and years. The bottom two-thirds, well, the southern two-thirds of it is a very, very well managed area of horse grazing. But about the third of it, to the north, is owned by Bearsted Parish Council, and it is a most wonderful nature reserve. And I can remember walking around it with Tony Harwood and with Clive English a few years ago, and Tony was absolutely beside himself with how wonderful it was. So if there's any hope of getting any help, technical advice from Maidstone Borough Council, I'm sure the Parish Council would very, very much appreciate that. Coming on to refresh and deliver the climate change and biodiversity strategy, once again, I think we do have a reference there to in our control, but I think we also need to make a reference to the resources as well, because it's all very well promising all these things, and you find out we haven't got staff to do it. And I think the staff resources need to be prioritised. There are certain mandatory things and important things we need to crack on with. Finally, on page 49, bottom of the page, continue delivery of a review of the local plan. I mean, that is absolutely vital, and I would have thought that should have been sort of the highest priority. Reference is made to the design and sustainability documents, but I wonder if we ought to actually spell out there the design and sustainability DPD and also the Gypsy and Traveller DPD. But more importantly, surely we should be referring to the SPDs we're preparing for the 3 housing areas we have at Lidsing, Heathlands and at Invicta Barracks. We need to be seen to be progressing with those developments. The development industry is out there waiting for us to fail on those, because they will be straight in with speculative applications all across the borough quicker than you can say environmental impact assessment. We have got to show the developers that we are serious and we are progressing those. And I think that is all I have to say for the time being. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't hear any motions, so lots of recommendations, but no actual amendments. So I recommend that I propose that we, yes, that we accept the recommendations. Call for a seconder. All right, so those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Thank you. And you can count me, yeah. Those against? Thank you, that is carried. Okay. All right, moving on to item 13. And that is you, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The medium-term financial strategy and the budget set out how what you've just heard about in the corporate strategy will be delivered. And there's 3 elements to this. There's the medium-term financial strategy, which complements the corporate strategy, revenue budget proposals and capital budget proposals. And as with the previous report, most of this work was done before the government's devolution white paper came out. So it's done on the basis that Maidstone Council will be a continuing entity and members will need to review what's in here in that light. But having said that, what is in here will deliver a balanced budget for next year, and we have to produce a balanced budget and set a council tax come what may. So just going through the different elements in it, the medium-term financial strategy, which is Appendix 1, gives the context for the detailed budget proposals, including the external economic environment. And we've developed some projections in there, which, if we did nothing at all, would leave us with a budget gap for next year of 600,000. So detailed revenue budget proposals have been prepared in part with the objective of closing that budget gap, but also to implement as much as possible of the corporate strategy. And the budget proposals for this pack, and this is just one part of the overall picture, are set out on pages 108 to 109 of the report and summarised in Appendix B on page 145. And within that, you've got budget growth, and there's a couple of items here reflective of the corporate strategy on the integrated transport strategy and continuing with creative community grants. There's also adjustments to address budget pressures and budget savings. And together with the budget proposals that will be going to the other packs, these, if approved by members at full council, will deliver a balanced budget for next year. The final part of it is the capital programme over the next 5 years, and details for this pack are set out on pages 112 to 113 and in Appendix C on page 146. And of course, this is only part of the capital programme. The biggest element in the capital programme is what's now called the Quality Homes for Life programme. And to deliver that and to ensure it provides social and affordable housing, the council does need to create the subsidy required for that. And the way it will do that is set out on page 114 in the report. And we do that by putting money aside in a housing investment fund. So the proposal that will be going to council is that we put spare resource that the council has into the housing investment fund and also put money into a nature recovery fund using that additional resource that we know we now have for next year. So you're asked to recommend to Cabinet in this report that it approves the draft medium-term financial strategy, the revenue budget proposals and the capital programme proposals. And the Cabinet members and I will be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Councillor Harper.
Thank you for that, Mark. And as you say, the sort of goalposts have moved since this was written and the work done on this earlier last year. And I think we all need to thank the staff for the amount of work put in to actually prepare the budget. I know every year it's a massive amount of work, probably starting pretty well in August, if not before, and running all the way through to December. So it involves a lot of people doing a lot of work, and I think we should all acknowledge the work put in to get us to this stage. It's nobody's fault in Maidstone that the government's moved the goalposts, and there's going to be local government reorganisation, and we know that the final curtain will come down on Maidstone Council by the end of 2027-28, when the new whatever unitary authority we move into, I suspect West Kent, will then take over the functions which up until that stage will have been run by this council. And I think it's good that we have a situation where we've got a balanced budget for next year. People over the next month or so may or may not make proposals to move things around, but at least we know we're starting off with everything in here and it all breaks even, as it were. So we're at a good starting point, which is where we need to be. Looking at the medium-term financial strategy on page 120, as I say, given that we know that Maidstone Council, as is, will cease to exist at the end of 27-28, so that's 3 years hence from now, the last 2 years of the financial projections won't be a responsibility of this authority. It will be one of whoever is on the West Kent unitary authority, if assuming that's what replaces us. But we still will be facing challenges looking at these figures over 2026, 27 and 2027, 28. Now they may or may not get better or worse as the government perhaps clarifies the whole process of local government reorganisation, the mayor coming in and potentially more money through the devolution agenda could potentially start flowing from May 2026, which may, filter down to the existing local authorities. Who knows? Who would have known a month ago that we'd be sitting here thinking that we've got a discrete deadline for when this authority is abolished. So a lot will happen, I'm sure, over the next few months as things get clarified. And I'm sure we'll be discussing this again clearly in overview and scrutiny when we can look at the budget across the whole of the council, and probably focusing, I imagine, on some of the newer items in terms of as I mentioned earlier, the deliverability, so that we focus on, it's better ways to focus if you've got a discrete timeline, half a dozen things done well rather than a dozen things and they're not achieved. So, that's the sort of discussion I would be looking potentially as we go to overview and scrutiny. But one thing I would perhaps propose as an amendment tonight is on the capital programme, which is the last page of the agenda, page 146. Because as it stands at the moment, as I say, given the Damocles sword hanging over this authority, the new leisure centre, which is scheduled to basically start in 2028-29, well, it won't do, will it? There won't be a Maidstone Council to take forward a leisure centre for Maidstone at that stage. We'll be a segment of a much larger authority. So I would suggest that we alter that timeline, and in light of the comments I made earlier and also Councillor Russell, that we bring that forward 2 years so that the £50,000 is spent in 25-26 and then 900,000 in 26-27 and £2 million in 27-28. Because if we don't leave, as I said earlier, the start of a leisure centre, by the time we all stand down here as councillors, it's unlikely there will be a new leisure centre delivered for the residents of Maidstone, this side of the middle of the century.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that proposal? No seconder. So that.
Can I just provide some explanation for why the profiling is as it is? And members who've been here for some time will recall that last year we extended the existing contract with Serco for operation of the leisure centre, and the profiling of this spend on replacement leisure facilities is intended such that when the existing contract reaches the maximum possible term, that there will then be new leisure facilities, and we can go out to the market and talk to the market about having good quality leisure facilities that will generate a return. So that's the reason that it hasn't been put in any earlier than is shown here. Clearly it's a decision for members if you wish to bring those figures forward, but just to explain why it's set out as it is.
Right, thank you. Councillor Harper first, or do you want to let Councillor Jeffries go?
Just if I can add to that, I mean, clearly, as I've said twice now, Councillor Harper, we're going to have to look at some of these priorities in terms of the emerging picture for local government reorganisation. But your point is well made, and one of the things we are very clear that we want to do is to make sure that the work that is planned and there's enough legacy stuff heading forward so that things like this don't get ignored by the new unitary authority. So if that's a way of doing it, we'll certainly look at that. But I think at this point in time, we kind of need to move forward with what we've got. But in a few months' time, once we've got better clarity over timetables and processes, absolutely we'll look at it. We'll be looking at the whole lot again to make sure that we can bake stuff in, so that, as you rightly point out, if the work's started, that's a really good way of keeping it, ensuring it finishes.
Thank you. It was actually Councillor Russell's.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the report and for the effort all put into it. I agree with the use of the one-off funding that we get. I think that's very sensible, and the assumptions are totally sound with the council tax base and all things like that. I would have seconded what Councillor Harper was saying, but the figures weren't quite right. So what I would like to propose is that we keep the existing capital programme table for the new leisure centre, because what has actually been done here is that it's kicked so far off into the horizon that the actual amount for the centre isn't even in it. So I would propose that we keep that line exactly how it is on page 141, because this is all preparatory work and stuff like that. We should just be doing this now. This is not going to, £50,000, nothing. £900,000, nothing when you're building a new centre. Even 2 million, that's not going to buy you a new centre. The big numbers are the 15 million and 29 million, which were in 2027, 28, 2028, 29. They need to stay. That has to stay. If you don't stay, and the thing is, as we all know with other things when they've come forward previously, is that this isn't, Mark Green hasn't got that money. He's not sitting in it on a, it's an aspiration. Every project comes to committee and gets looked at individually on its, at the moment in time when you're looking to borrow the money for it, pros and cons, etc., etc., etc. This is a commitment in a capital strategy. It may be changed again by the new authority, but if we kick it so far back, well, it won't be there even in the first place. The new authority won't even know that we ever wanted one in the first place. And I don't want to go forward on that basis. So we need to go forward on the basis of, so I propose that that line in the capital strategy stays exactly as it says, new leisure centre on page 141.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. So do all those agree that? Yeah, we're voting on the amendment, for the amendment. We need to take, unless it's directly related to that amendment.
Really, I just wanted to sort of give a little bit of caution, because there are two things here. We want to deliver all of this, obviously, but we've got an incident that's coming down which gives us a sort of a known unknown, if we were sort of using terminology that's been bounded in the past. My concern is we can pull things back in and we can quickly do things so that we meet a deadline and we can get some sort of critical mass before things happen. The risk of doing that is that we make a right pig's ear of it, and we do it so badly that when things do change, those that come along are going to say, this is shocking, we're just going to pull the plug on it. So I'm not sure. I think we've got a good basis here as it stands. We know that there are things that still need to be bottomed out, but I just feel that we're sort of we're playing at planning things that we don't quite know enough about to pull one way or the other. I think it's on there, it wants to be delivered, or we want it to be delivered. I'm just concerned that we're making decisions here when we don't have enough information to decide whether we should pull it forward, push it back. And that, to me, if we pull it forward and we get it wrong, it puts a big risk on it, and that's not what we want.
Right, thank you. Going to the vote in favour of the... Right, Councillor, yes.
Thank you. Sorry, it is relating to that, because I want the leisure centre built, But I thought we couldn't pull it forward because of the contracts. Have I misheard that? Have I misunderstood that? Because if we can't pull it forward because of those contracts, I want to be clear what I'm voting on. I'm not being pedantic, but if we can't do it, so could I get an answer on whether that is possible or whether it is... Yeah, thank you.
It's certainly possible for the expenditure to be brought forward, but the expenditure here isn't necessary until the dates that it's set out for. That's the point. It's not that you can't spend the money, but Councillor Clark makes the point, why would you spend the money and then risk having that money wasted, which I think is the relevant point here.
Yes, Councillor Harper.
I think I've heard what's been said. As I said earlier, we have done lots of reports here. We've had designed up leisure centres of what a new facility may look like. Councillors here over the last few years have done site visits to 4 or 5 leisure centres in the southeast to see what can be delivered. So there is a lot of existing information. There is a very, short of doing all of that work all over again, there's not much more information you can get. It's all sitting on the files, a quarter of a mile from here in Maidstone House, or where our servers keep the information. So the work has been done. We could probably, I'm not saying, but you could probably, if you wished to, get to a situation where in the course of the next year or less, put in a detailed planning application for what a new leisure centre may look like, or actually what would be, and then actually start the process. By doing what Councillor Russell and I have seconded, it helps keep the thing on track. It makes it clear that we will be progressing this. Yes, the Serco contract has been extended for a period of time, and as Mark said, within that there's chances to extend it even further, but we don't need to wait till the very end. We can move forward now. The likelihood is the new facility is likely to be built on the car park or on land immediately around the current leisure centre, so the existing one can probably work through to the point at which the new one opens, and therefore Serco can be managing that all the way up until the day at which that one closes and the new one opens, hopefully by 2030 or 2031. So I would just urge everybody to support this proposal. It's a fairly mild thing we're suggesting, but it's just an important flagging up of what will be one of the major issues we can deliver for our residents before we're abolished.
Thank you. Councillor Russell, could you please repeat what you're proposing, your amendment was?
I'm proposing that it stays as it is, so I'm not proposing anything be moved even further forward, or obviously the proposal here is to move it further back. So I'm proposing that the line on the capital programme 2025-26 to 2029-2030 that says new leisure centre stays with the figures exactly as in table 7 on page 141, capital programme 2024-25 to 2028-29, where it says new leisure centre, those figures.
Thank you. So all those in favour of that amendment, please show. Thank you. Sorry, all those against, please show. And I have the casting vote. Oh, lovely. I vote in favour of the motion. Thank you. The other recommendations on page 4, I propose that we agree them. A seconder? Thank you. A seconder. All those in favour? Thank you. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for attending. attending in this nasty weather. Hope you all have a safe journey home. And good night and thank you.